Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and we had a really big weekend for the One Piece card game this weekend, at least the English version of it. We had 5 large events around the world. I currently have data for like 2.5 of them, and I'm really excited to go over it for this video in general. So if you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. We make a lot of One Piece content, and I don't want you guys to miss it. Also, we do have all this data for these events and many others on my website, Eggman Events, which you can check out, linked in the description. We also keep this up to date as much as we can with stuff for, the OP11 meta for this one. We also do have this deck list table, which has over 300 deck lists that have been doing well around the world across this meta in general. I think it's a really strong resource, and you guys can make sure to check it out as well. But for this video in particular, we're going to focus more on 3 events, and mostly the unsung events Toronto regionals, because one, it's the region that I'm from. I know it a little bit more just data wise as well, and the fact that just all of the top 32 is here. As a recording, I don't have the leader data for this event, but it will be updated on the site later this week, so make sure to keep checking back, and I will post about it on my socials when I do have that data too. So we have this event as well as the 2 loose regionals, which we do have all of the top 32 leaders. I only have about 50% of the deck list for this one, so if you guys have any access to any additional deck lists or know who I could reach out to, I would love to get as much of the data as I can for this one in particular. And then we also have the Song events June Mexico regionals, which we do have the entirety of the top 8 for this one, so we're going to look at a couple of these deck lists. There also were 2 other events in Chile this regionals. There was an offline regionals and offline treasure cup. I don't have really any data for that one right now. If that changes, I'll make some updates on the website too. But again, we had 5 like pretty sizable events, which I think is pretty remarkable for just one weekend, even though they're across a bunch of different regions as well. So other than that, we are just going to jump on into it. So we're going to start with, again, the unsung events to Toronto regionals, looking at the leader spread. So we do have 6 Betty, 5 copies of the green purple and also the blue and purple Luffy, 3 copies of the standard purple Luffy, 3 Buggy, 2 Law, 2 Lucci, and then single copies of Teach, purple Katakuri, Bonney, Smoker, Yamato, and Zoro. So this is the first time we've really seen Katakuri and Zoro get a top in this event, which I think is really cool. Also, the winner for this event, and every event we're talking about today, is Betty. And even looking at the top 4 for this event specifically, like Betty was very present for this meta, right? We've got first place there. I think every European regionals that has happened offline since this meta started has been won by Betty, which is absurd as a stat as to say that. And then also we did have it win Mexico. So one thing I will mention is that, I kind of made a tier list a couple days ago saying like, oh, Betty's kind of like anti-meta to kind of counter what a lot of these other meta decks are playing right now. And I think it's kind of surpassed that at this point, right? The fact that I think the deck is pretty meta in its own regard. It has a lot of its own good matchups, and it's been definitely a force. The fact that it's won, I think, like 6+ regionals in this season, right? When it's not even we've had like less than 10 events, is like crazy statistically for how good this deck has been doing. So we do also have for the 2 loose one, we did have 10 copies of blue purple Luffy, 4 Buggy, 3 Law, 3 copies of Betty, 2 Bonney, 2 Smoker, and then and 2 purple Luffy, and then single copies of Teach, Lim, green purple Luffy, Yamato, Marco, and black and purple Luffy. I do not have the deck list for Marco or black and purple Luffy right now. I would love to have that data right now, but I do not. So if you guys have any of those deck lists in particular, let me know. Definitely not biased for the Marco deck list at all, but I would love to see what it would look like. But I think we're also seeing that there's so much diversity for these events too, right? Like this is one of the more open metas, I think, in this game in general. There's just a lot of decks that can be successful for it, and a lot of these pie charts that we've been able to see have been kind of reflecting that, right? There's been like a little bit of exceptions for it, but there's just so much room for creativity and like choosing a deck that you really kind of jive with and being able to do well with it. So last thing before we get into the deck list is I'm just kind of noticing that for this week in particular, I did see that Green Yellow Law was a little bit more successful than usual. Buggy in particular, I think, had a bit of a breakout performance, doing pretty well in every event we're going over, and seeing, I think, a little bit more success than it's been seeing like the first couple weeks for it. Rob Lucci is still very viable. I think Bonney is still in a good spot. It was able to top every one of these events, which before this past weekend in Las Vegas, Bonney wasn't really doing anything in this meta. So it's cool to see it getting some more tops, especially with some of the new Star Deck cards. And we'll have to see if it continues to do well as this meta progresses. But We do have a lot of deck lists. You guys can check the timestamps if there's one you really want to jump to. We're probably going to be a little bit more brief going over these leaders because, again, we've got a lot of them to go over. And we're going to start off with our first place list. It is the 3 copies of Betty. So we do have the TheLownen's version, which is able to win the Unsung Events Canadian event. We do also have Joan's version, which is able to win the French event. And also we do have Alejandro, who is able to win the Mexican event. So one big thing is that there isn't like a lot of build diversity for Betty. You guys kind of know what these decks look like, right? If you have Emporio and Karasu, like you're already like way ahead of the curve a lot of the time. One thing that I've been seeing way more often included in the deck is the 2K Sabo. This is a promo card that we got kind of late in compared to how they got in Japan. And the promo card does not look like this. This is just the default from when it was released in Japan. So I'll probably try to get this image updated on the website soon. But this just being a Revolution Army, the fact that this is a 2K, the fact that it's a 5.5K, that you're able to help you get cards from your life is really good, since this card like kind of draws you one every turn. All of these are just kind of great effects, I think, in its own way. So I know a lot of people, I don't think like this is needed for you to play the deck. I know it's probably one of the more expensive cards in the deck right now, but I do think that it's very helpful. For the North American event, we do have also the Honesty Impact, kind of a tech that I haven't seen in this deck in particular. I know that like Pistol has been a really great removal card for red in general, but you do need that 6K body, which isn't necessarily too tough for Betty to use, but I do think that this card having like a slightly better trigger, there are a lot of times where like you just have so much Dawn to work with that spending 6 is not really that much different than spending 4, especially since you're already like boosting up your your characters by using that. So by and large, I think that's a really good tech for some matchups that's able to establish some bigger blockers. We also do just kind of have, I'd say like this is like a mildly more standard version. We do have a couple more of the triggers though with the Morley here. This also being able to get around blockers just kind of sets up some, like, it is a little bit slower because you have to, play it and then use the effect from it. But being able to have more cards that have those triggers, I think, is great. And then also we have this version here, which is running the 7-cost Sabo. So we don't see this card as much. It came out in OP09, which, had the second wave of Betty support, essentially. But on play, add up to 1 Revolution Army type character from your hand to the top of your life face up. Then if you have 2 or more life cards, add 1 card from the top or bottom of your life cards to your hand. So being able to set up a future trigger, but also like potentially draw cards, right? Like this is great. And also the trigger from this card is fantastic. Just draw 2 cards, which can help you get back in the game or have way more, things to discard too. So generally speaking, I think Betty is now really to a point where it's gotten a lot of success from this current meta, and there's enough people on usage where you have to really respect it as a deck and what it can do. And I'm curious to see if there will be more people who are playing hard counters to it, like Buggy or Rob Lucci in the next couple weeks, just because of how popular this deck has been and how successful it's been at a top level too. So again, these are the 3 builds, and congratulations to all of our winners across these 3 decks. Next up, we've got Green Purple Luffy. So this is Xing's version of the deck, and this is a top 4 finish from the Toronto Regional. So not much to say, I think, about Green Purple Luffy. Most people kind of know what this deck has looked like for the last month plus. There has been some tiny optimizations for specifically this meta. I think most people are on Frankie just because there are so many kind of purple ramp decks that even if you don't use your leader effect, this can get you a ramp, which is really nice. Chopper, I've been seeing people usually at 2 to 4 copies. Same kind of idea where this can get you a free ramp because you're playing against another ramp deck. You do have to be careful against kind of green decks where they can rest it and not remove it, which means you have to respect the fact that you can't use your leader effect next turn, or you'd have to like overplay it to be able to get that additional effect. And then one kind of spicy add for this build is the Hody Jones. Technically, you can run this card. There's no reason that you can't. The issue is that, you can't, you'd have to sequence it correctly if you're using your leader ability. The Green Purple Luffy leader specifically says if you have only Straw Hat Crew type characters in play, you get to resolve this effect. There are some times where like you can still like use the Dawn -2, and then you get like, for example, you have like the Sanji Pudding, so you technically get like a Dawn back active, but you can't resolve the rest of the effect. So by and large, I think like most people just don't expect the Hody, and it's still like one of the best finishers in the game. So I don't think it's too outrageous of an ad. It's not the first time I've seen the card in the deck, but it is, obviously a bit of a risk factor, right? A non-counter that not only does this take a card out of your life when you play it, but if you play it, then you just can't use your leader ability for kind of the rest of the game either. So there are some times like you can use like green purple Luffy's leader effect first and then play Hody as well. So it's not outrageous for you to do that sequencing either. But yeah, it's just kind of an interesting card for the deck where I'm sure like in Swiss it caught a lot of people off guard and probably won a game or two because they weren't playing around Hody, which is kind of makes sense. But you know, when we're in Top Cut with open deck lists, it's a little bit of a different story. But anyways, this is Xing's copy of the deck. Congratulations to Green Purple. Their Green Purple finish and all the Green Purple Luffy finishes throughout the weekend as well. Next up, we've got Purple Luffy. So we've got two builds that were in the top 8 of Toronto. We've got the Purple Luffy from mynameisjapes as well as Beard for their two versions. This deck has been kind of in a weird kind of, I would say, flux state where one, I do think it's a deck that can really take advantage of 8-drop Katakuri. I also think that 9-drop Luffy is particularly good in this format if you ramp to it consistently. The fact that it's a 9-drop 10k that gets rushed, that gets the card draw, the fact that you don't even really care, you go down to life, because a lot of decks just really can't efficiently remove this card because of how big it is. And a 10k attack every turn means that even if you're playing against blue and purple Luffy, they have to give you Gum Gum Giant and another card to get out of the attack, which is just a lot of value for this deck in particular. So I think that's something that's really worth ramping to. I haven't seen as many people on Luffy Taro, but it is like, you know, instead of like a 4 of, this was like the centerpiece of the deck, it is now kind of like a way to just kind of get some additional value. But again, it is kind of a little bit risky for that as well. And then we also do have 8-drop Katakuri. So I do think like best curve for this deck at times is like you ramp to 9 Dawn, you play Luffy, you use the effect to attack with it, and then next turn you go to Katakuri, and then you get your additional effects from there. So I have been seeing a lot of people play the Miss Double Finger, specifically because one, the trigger effect to play out another card is fine. The fact that it's a 2k is good, and sometimes like you want to be able to ramp with this deck without having to take the cards from your life in specific matchups. So obviously Bond Clay also kind of fits that functionality as well, but being able to have both of them and both, you know, having a 2k for late game really helps you out in a lot of ways. So specifically Beard's build has a couple more like extra attacks. Like we do have the slow beam sword, which I've seen in like the blue purple Katakuri list from Nick from that won the Las Vegas regionals last weekend. And then again, like both decks were kind of on the card as just, you know what, sometimes like this, if your opponent doesn't play around this card, they just lose on the spot, right? It is just kind of like a tacky one of, and again, I think it does do worse in the fact that, you know, in open list Top Cut, you're in a worse spot. But also, when your opponent knows that this card exists in your deck list, you can just leave 2 Dawn open, and then they have to kind of decide how they play around or what they play around. And even like sometimes people playing around the card that you tech means that it still does its job, right? Even if you don't have it, right? It makes your opponent play a little bit more inefficient, and that can help you kind of get that extra 1k or 2k in the spots where you need to. So other than that, I think Purple Luffy's still in a good spot. I don't think that's a controversial statement. And congratulations to both Japes and Beard for their finishes there. Next up, we've got Blue Purple Luffy. So we've got Adamster's version from, again, the Toronto Regional. Generally speaking, most of the deck lists we're looking for are the Toronto ones just because I have the full deck list, but there will be some exceptions here and there. I did look at every deck list that I was able to find for Blue Purple Luffy, at least as of recording, and none of them were running the Doflamingo package. I know a lot of people were wondering if it was going to continue to do well. It did win the regionals last week in Vegas once again with the the Doflamingo and Rosinante build, but most people were all the people who were able to top were on, I would say, the more standard deck list here, with kind of, there's no like the 9-drop Sanji package and nothing real else. So some kind of text though I see in this build for particular is that we do have a lot more removal than usual. We do have 2 copies of Red Rock. We do have 2 copies of Raging Tiger as well as the Mihawk. This card is pretty nasty against specifically green purple Luffy and also purple and black Luffy, since they play some really kind of like keystone 5 drops or 7 drops. Like Sanji Pudding's a 7-drop half the time, right? So using Mihawk to get rid of that on curve is really great. Obviously, like Sanji and the Mihawk to get rid of that and get your own board established is really strong. So I think that's great. Other than that, we do have like our Linlin, our Katakuri, a lot of our 2Ks. We do have some tech cards as well as like the Tony Chopper from Star Deck 26. This just being able to be a blocker that's also in the mirror match or any real like purple Luffy mirror match. Being able to like rest the Dawn that they are trying to use for Giant that usually is like a benefit for your Dawn, right? You're using 3 Dawn to get rid of their Dawn for Giant, and then not only do they not have like one more 4K to get out, but they also sometimes they need that cycle to fix the cards in their hand to get, more 1s and 2Ks that are on top of their deck and such. So by and large, I think Blue Purple Luffy is still really strong in this meta. I'm not convinced it's the best deck in this format. I think it's the most popular leader that people are playing, so it gets a lot of bonus points for that. But it's still a force to be reckoned with, and you do have to respect just how good this deck can be if they're all set up. So again, here's a build from Adamster, and congratulations for their finish here. Next up, we've got Buggy, and we've got a couple builds here. We've got John Carlos with their build, as well as Trec's version. Trec was able to get a top 4 finish in France with this build. So I will say that this build from John Carlos, Jean Carlos, probably Jean Carlos. Their build is, I would say, like closer to where I was at the beginning of this format. We are running just a lot of the great cards that are known, right? We've got pretty much a whole star deck of just 4-ofs that we add, right? The Kabaji, Buggy, Moji, Alvida, and the Croc and Mihawk, but all these cards are just really great. I know a lot of people are sometimes at like 2 or 3 copies of Buggy, depending on how they feel for it, but obviously still like Croc, Mihawk, and the Buggy into the other Mihawk is such a good combo for this deck still. And then this one is a bit more like teched out for event cards. So we do have Crossguild and Sanji's Pilaf, which I think those two aren't as absurd, but we do have the Sables, which in my opinion, I think is like a staple like 2-of for the deck. The fact that the trigger effect is real good. Bouncy a 7 cost back to your opponent's hand is fantastic. This helps you against green purple, I think specifically as well, and can just buy you some additional time. And we also do have like the Love Mellow, which this is also 7 Warlords of the Sea, which you don't really get any searches off the Mr. 3. This only looks for the Baroque Works part of this, just in case you thought this could find it. Just want to mention that. But sometimes you do just have like 2 extra Dawn. You're really kind of flexible in your Dawn at points where you do have to spend 5, but being able to have like your own like more expensive version of Gum Gum Giant is still really good. You also have to get 3 or less cards. There's a lot more conditions for it, but since we're such a card advantage kind of base deck, this is really strong, I think, for those scenarios too. So again, this is Carlos's build for the North American event, and then also for top 4, this is Trec's build, which I would say this one is more representative, like maybe where the deck is moving forward. So some kind of more specific text and things to notice. One, we don't have any copies of the 7-drop Croc, which we're playing here. I will 100% agree, like this card is fine. Like it does put 2 bodies on the board, but it doesn't really do as much as you kind of want, right? Like the fact that you put 2 bodies out is great. Obviously, Croc and Mihawk is way better, and I know Promo Buggy also just being able to play a bigger cost body. So the fact this can play Mihawk is nice. I do think this is the weakest of the 3, so if you want to find more space for that, that's great. We are playing the 7-drop Doflamingo, which again, interacting with 7 costs in this meta is really strong. This does just kind of buy you some time, and even if you have to play this for the full 7, I think most people would do that. We also can be kind of greedy with kind of having non-counters in this deck because we do have so many ways to discard cards from our hand, which is really strong. And then we do have additional removal of the Raging Tiger. This can be good for like a 2-for-1 trade. We also do have like the Charlotte Pudding, which I know a lot of people likely aren't playing around this in Buggy as much, so this can just kind of win you the game by card advantage wise. And in general, we just kind of have some more of the standard stuff. But honestly, this would be the build that I'd be a little bit more interested in testing with Buggy moving forward. I think again, Dofi is like a really strong choice, and like you're a little bit less consistent with putting out more bodies on the board without 7-drop Croc, but I think you have enough with the Croc and Mihawk and Buggy to be able to really still take advantage of that and still have some more interaction against decks with the Doflamingo as well. So here's the build here from, again, Carlos and Trec, and congratulations for their finishes there. Next, we've got Teach, and so this is Teapo's version of the deck. We do have the new star deck for Teach that came out at the beginning of the set, and we do kind of notice like what cards are pretty good from this, right? Unsurprising, it's the 2 super rares. It's the 6-drop Kuzan as well as the 7-drop Marshall.D.Teach. I think most people are on like 2 or 3 copies of both these cards at this point. I really do like the idea of like a more removal-based version of Teach using cards like, once again, 7-drop, but also like having Tempest Kick. It's pretty easy for us to put 10 cards into a drop as long as we find 1 or 2 copies of My Era Begins, as well as being able to like use Kuzan to bounce into Von Augur to then be able to use Teach. having both those cards out at the same time just means that you not only remove something, but if they don't remove these cards, they kind of lose a 6 cost pretty easily on the next turn. And then even if they do remove these cards, they give you card draw off the on KOs. So I think all of that is very good. We do also have like a single copy of the Wolf here, being able to just be kind of a stickier blocker that lets you, get that +1 cost. I think is strong. This can just be tougher to remove because this will be like a really high costed card in the mid to late game. And then just kind of more of the standard cards that we've been seeing from this deck. So last thing is that I do think like Finger Pistol is still great in this meta, especially since we have access to, again, Von Augur and everything. Even if you just play like Kuzan on 5 and then they play a big body, you can Kuzan into Von Augur into getting rid of an 8 cost or less, which is a lot of cards in this meta, including 8-drop Katakuri, which I think is, again, a bit of a menace in some times. So last thing I'll notice is that like Teach doesn't, like the 10-drop is a really strong card for this deck, but I think more and more players aren't just saying that 10 Dawn turn has to be 10 drop Teach. There are a lot of alternative plays, or if you have like a really good like board swarm or removal play, a lot of people are kind of opting for that a little bit more. And I think that's something that's really impactful for what this kind of meta is looking like, and is a good adaptation in general. So not much more to say. Here's the build. Congratulations to Teapo for their finish with Teach. The next up, we've got green and yellow Law. So we've got two different builds. We've got Bouzyyy, who's able to get a top 16 in the Toronto regionals, as well as Gaston, who's able to get a second place finish in France as well. So I do not know this information. I don't know if these two players talk to each other or if there was, much crosstalk between the two. But I do think that if not, it's very interesting to me that these cards are 49 cards, at least the cards that they use. There are some like minor ratio differences, but they are almost identical in the cards they use. The only difference is that Gaston used one copy of the Restand Law from Starter Deck 2. This is, I think, like one of the cards that is like up in the air if it's used. It's obviously a really great card if you already have a board established, but if you don't, it doesn't really do anything, right? So that's kind of like the mix up for this card in general. Is like it's a good late game card, but if you're trying to really start your momentum, you want pretty much any other 5-drop Supernova. So that aside, that's really the big difference between these two decks. Like you'll see there again are some like minor ratio changes, right? How many of these 7-drop laws do you want to run? Like 3 or 4 copies. Most people are still on like 2 copies of Kid just because the card is like super searchable as well. People aren't on Rosie though. Most people are just on the beige since it does have like a protection effect. And I would kind of say like even healing the Kid is almost like better than like getting like a defense for it at times. So I think that's strong. And like this beige blocker is really obnoxious against most decks that don't run like Hody in a lot of times. And obviously if you have beige with Kid, they can't just Hody and be good with it. And then obviously the new Kid Killer from Star Deck 24 really helped this deck, just being able to have like another copy of a card that's able to help us finer pieces and get really set up. And the fact that it costs 2 is actually more of a benefit than a negative, because it's easier for us to get 5 costs of cards on the board and get that condition kind of met, right? Like on turn 2 you play Kid Killer and then you can play Bonney on turn 1 you play Kid Killer, turn 2 you play Bonney, and then you already have your setup to play your first 5-drop, which can just be like a Cavendish, even Law to rebalance the Killer, play it again. There's already like it sets up so many combos, and I think it's a really strong card for this deck, and something it was missing it, even though it was for a different leader for a starter deck. So other than that, this might be a deck that I do a little bit more testing with in the future. I know a lot of people really believe in this deck, and I think that it got a lot of finishes this weekend, a lot more than I was expecting to. So congratulations to all of our green yellow Law players this weekend, and specifically Boys and Gaston for their finishes here. Next up, we got Purple Katakuri, and this is the first time we've seen this one in a top cut breakdown in this meta. So this is Dimentio's version of the deck, and in case you guys don't know what this leader does, when attacking on your opponent's attack, once per turn, Dawn -1, look at the top card of your opponent's deck. Then this leader gets 10 or plus 1,000 power during this battle. So something you can use aggressively, defensively. It's something where you can like use these additional like pluses and minuses for Dawn in your advantage, and also the deck kind of revolves around knowing the top card of your opponent's deck to get some additional effects, right? So kind of the best card for that in that scenario is the 5-drop Parasparrow. Once per turn, you may trash 1 card from your hand, choose a cost, and reveal 1 card from the top. If the reveal cost has that cost, the reveal card has that cost, you get to draw a card, and then you get to set 1 Dawn active. So on the turn that you play it, technically it costs 4, but it's 5 because you have to play it Dawn -1 with your leader effect to look at the top card, but then you get a free cycle, and then you get to look at the top card of your deck. So I think that's strong. And then we do have like Charlotte Pudding, which is able to get like Dawn back essentially. Also, 2-drop Katakuri is a busted card, so you may trash this card if your character has, if your leader has Big Mom Pirates. You get to play Katakuri. Cost of 3 or less, or 3 or more, that is equal or less than the number of Dawn in your opponent's field. So if your opponent has 8 Dawn, you can use Katakuri to go into 8-drop Katakuri for like a really for 1 extra card from hand, but way less in particular, and then kind of like the rest of the field here. So generally speaking, I think this deck is almost good, almost really good. I know a lot of people have been testing a lot of different tools for it. I do think like the Bond Clay is just like a more consistent ramper, makes sense too. But like obviously the deck that's supposed to play 8-drop Katakuri isn't like the worst deck in the game. We also do have like this 10-drop Linlin, which having Rush is fantastic and helps in a lot of situations. I think like the biggest issue with this deck is that we don't really have any hard removal. That's like the big kind of cornerstone for this deck compared to especially something like Blue Purple Luffy, which kind of tries to do the same thing. You ramp up to your big bodies and play a lot of big bodies on board. The fact that you really don't have ways to interact with like blockers or remove anything just means that we do have 7-cost Sanji to rest blockers, but like outside of that, like we don't have like a lot of tools to help us in those kind of late game scenarios where you really need to get rid of a body efficiently, and we just really don't have a way to do that. But I think this deck does have a lot of promise. It's really cool to see this top 32, and congratulations to Dimentio for their finish there. Next up, we've got Bonney, and so we've got a couple builds. We've got Angus's as well as Emmanuel's version, who was able to get a top 4 finish in the Mexico regionals here. This definitely was a deck that, I think a lot of people were were just lukewarm about the support that Bonney got, right? I think there are some great pieces, and it helps out the deck a lot, but nothing was just like a breakout, like, man, this super rare is really good for the deck, right? Kid Killer, I think, is really impactful. I really play it in all my Bonney builds, but it's really interesting to see that it's such a decision point if you play this card or not. So for example, for Angus's build, they're not playing it, but then we're seeing it 3 copies for Emmanuel's build as well. I think my favorite card for the deck, though, is this Beige. Just being able to be a 2-drop blocker that lets you filter your hand is really what this deck needs. We have so many good cards, but a lot of them just don't have any counter, and because of that, they just end up stuck in our hand with not really much to do with. So Beige being able to even say like, all right, 8-drop Kid into Beige into draw 1, trash, one of my 3 Hodies in hand is a really good value. It just really helps the deck out, and obviously getting deeper into your deck to help you find your Hodies, which otherwise is an unsearchable card, I think is strong. Also, most people I think are on 9-drop Zoro in this deck too. Not a lot of decks can interact with this card nicely, and if you're playing against like Blue Purple Luffy, you're like, you better play Red Rock, because if you don't, then I get to really pressure you very effectively on this next turn too. So I think that's very strong. We do also have the additional builds where, again, we are playing like Kid Killer. Rouge has gone a big kind of resurgence, especially since we're in a meta where Doflamingo and Rob Lucci aren't as present. It just means that you can play a 4-drop and feel moderately safe about it existing for the majority of this game. And we do also see another flashback in Basil Hawkins. So this is from OP07, the set that Bonney came out in. It's a little bit peculiar on how it works, but it's a blocker in this deck, and then if this character would be removed by the field by your opponent's effect, you may rest one of your opponent's characters instead. So if they have removal that, like for example, if they try to play like 9-drop Linlin to remove this card, you can just rest the Linlin that played to get rid of it instead. So I do think that this has like a good amount of protection in a meta that likely wouldn't otherwise. And like it makes your opponent have to do some like weird things to get rid of this otherwise too. So I don't think it's like a terrible card to kind of reinvest in this meta for anyone trying to pick up Bonney in the next couple weeks too. So here are the builds. There are a couple other Bonnies if you guys want to check it out. And congratulations to Angus and Emmanuel in particular. Next up, we've got Smoker, and Smoker was able to get a couple tops as well across the American and French regionals. Sorry, the North American and European regionals. So we do have the build here from MasterYesus as well as Raphael Neven as 2. Neven also did a quick video going over their deck, which is linked on the page if you click his name. But this deck in particular, this deck I think has been shown on our TCG matchmaking like power rankings. This deck has a lot of moderately good matchups, I think, in this meta in general. There's a lot of like positive matchups. I think the only matchup that is, you know, causing it trouble sometimes is like some like minor removal matchups. But generally speaking, I think this has been like proven to be better and better as the weeks have kind of gone on. I think part of the reason this deck might not be doing as well as it could be is just not a lot of people are on it. I personally don't. I have a lot of frustrations with this deck because there are so many scenarios where I'm like, man, I just do not have cards to play. I have 3 Hodies in my hand and I'm a 4 life leader, and that's really expensive to play a Hodie in kind of those situations at times. But if we're able to kind of start with the aggression early, we just have like stuff like, you know, Smoker on curve is still a really good card. You know, Dragon on curve, a lot of people aren't kind of respecting the amount of power that you're able to output with that. We have some more removal cards. Obviously, Mole Pistol has been very strong with this deck since the beginning, but also Honesty Impact is strong, especially since we do have the Kyujaku, which can search it, which is nice. There's just a lot of like good pieces that, you know, make Smoker look a little bit better into this meta than I was expecting. So other things, one like additional tech is the Borsellino. This is from OP11 that Raphael was playing. So block or activate main, you can rest this character up to one of your Navy type leaders or characters can also attack active characters during this turn. So in like some scenarios, you can play this out and Smoker can attack into like Borsellino. There's just some times where you need to attack active cards instead. So that being like your removal instead, I think is good. And on top of it, just being a blocker that you can play off 8-drop Kid, all of that just seems pretty good for a deck that just ends up working well, you know, archetype wise, since it is also Navy and just your leaders also. It's just like a solid card, I think, and a good pick for the deck. So if I was to test this more, I'd probably test Borsellino, see what I think about it. But I think it's a good adaptation for the meta that we're seeing as well. So those are the 2 builds. Congratulations to MasterYesus and Neven for their finishes with Smoker. We've got a couple more as we're ending this video. We've got Yamato, which we do have Exacte's version of this deck. This also topped the French regionals. I just currently do not have the deck list for it, but I think Yamato's in a pretty good spot for this meta. We did also see it get a really good finish in the Las Vegas regionals last week too. I think it's also just a deck that there's not a lot of people on the deck itself, so it's harder for it to get multiple tops in an event, but being able to be like one of the more aggressive decks in this format, especially like an aggressive deck that can end with Hodie. Like Hodie still is like, again, one of the best finishers for this game in general. So I do think Yamato plays a little bit different than most decks in this game too. You really have to respect the double attack potential from it. Also the fact that there are a lot of decks that just have 4 or 3 life is fantastic, especially like Blue Purple Luffy. Your activate main is just always active unless they just have like some additional Linlen effects, but that is so strong, I think, in this deck in general. And if your opponent's not careful, like you can just like hit them with leader twice and then like Hodie, and then they can't defend with giant, and then they just lose. Like unironically, like if you put enough pressure, like this can have like a really good matchup into, you know, Blue Purple Luffy, just because it is a 3 life leader. So other than that, I really do like what the support for the star deck added, right? Izo's been like a really great card that not only is aggressive with the banish, but also being able to have the blocker. Yamato being like a searcher in a deck that was desperately asking for like an on archetype one. We had like Momo before, but like that 2 extra Dawn, like that 1 extra Dawn was sometimes expensive. And the fact that we can convert this into an attacker pretty easily with leader effect is strong. Onami just is like, now that we have like 8 ways to give banish to our leader, our opponent really has to respect that. And then lastly, we do have like the like Hiko Nojo's always been strong. Momo blocker to be able to put like a Yamato back into her life later, or like anything else. Doji's really great against like Bonney and other like 5 life leaders, where you can still like use your leader attack, they take the damage, and then Doji is still online, so that's fantastic. And then again, like our end state of like Cody Jones, and also Demonic Aura 9 sword style, Ostro Demon 9 flash, being able to like be like a mini Hodie, or get rid of like a blocker, as long as you have something with cost 3 or more on the board, which again, like most people will just, you can like play out your Doji and then just leave it on the board, because most people won't interact with this unless they have to, and that just being like a target for the Demonic Aura is really strong too. So here's the build here from Exacte. Congratulations for their finish with Yamato. Then next up, we've got a couple builds of Rob Lucci, which has still just been really present in this meta, regardless of the restrictions and just kind of everything else around it. So we have SZ warriorten for the Toronto event, as well as Aldo for the event in Mexico. So again, mostly I think most of these decks are just kind of revolving around 10-drop Kuzan. The fact that, you know, a lot of other decks can't remove this card too. means that you do being able to give like a blanket -5 cost to everything means that specifically against like blue purple Luffy, they can't interact with this card outside of giant, and then you just get like some free removal against a lot of decks. I think 4-drop Kuzan is still like a menacing card. If you play this card on curve, your opponent really has to respect that you can't really play a card without like Kuzan just getting that removal on the next turn. Which is great. Obviously, Rebecca's a strong card. Monstery being able to get the recycle and everything else has been good for the deck. We do also have like some additions of like we do see like some interesting text like this Kobe, right? This being able to get rid of a 2 or less and essentially a 3 or less on curve if you use your Lucci effect. So that removal is good in those spots too. I think like particularly like if you're worried about like some impactful 3 costs with like Zoro Juro, right? If you're worried that if you're playing against blue purple Luffy and they just play Zoro Juro, like you outside of that, like you'd have to use like something like Suru and Brook, or you have to play like 4-drop Lucci, and to do so you'd have to like put 3 cards into your trash, which if they don't attack you turn 1 is just difficult to do. So having like Kobe like a backup way to remove these cards I think is good in those scenarios. And also like your opponent has to like attack into it, and then that buys you another attack. And then like lastly we do see like the attack of like the 3-drop Garp. So this is from Star Deck 19. Once per turn you may place 1 card from your trash to the bottom of your deck, give up to one of your opponent's characters -1 cost during this turn. So just being able to be a blocker that helps you get things into range for removal. I do think like Lucci still is like a lot of times where you're like, I don't want to use Tempest Kick for something that's only like 1 Dawn away or 1 cost away from like removing. So I think that Garp is a cool adaptation for that kind of point as well, especially since like you can play Garp early on curve and then like still, even if it's like a mini copy of like Rob Lucci or like of Kuzan, right? Let's say you play it on 3 and then your opponent plays a 4-drop of some kind, you're able to Lucci leader effect, and then you can use Garp effect, and then you can use 4-drop Lucci, and then you can get rid of a 4 cost, which really is strong, I think, too. So that's impactful for those kind of scenarios. You do have to like have like 1 less card into your trash, but again, Lucci's really great at putting cards in there as well. So not much more to say, but congratulations to all of our Lucci players, and I'm sure we'll continue to see them do well in the next couple weeks. And then we've got a couple of more interesting leaders these are kind of like one-ofs, kind of more unique leaders as well. But we've got Kevin's version of Lim, which was able to get a finish in the French regional. So we saw Lim do pretty well, I think, for the majority of OP10. EBO2 came around, and I think that the deck dropped off a little bit, and then also with OP11 the deck is kind of tough. I think the issue with this deck in particular is not that there's not as much removal, I think, as like a more Rob Lucci or Doflamingo kind of centered format. But the issue with this deck is that a lot of the removal that exists in this meta really targets 5-drops and 6-drops, which is the majority of what this deck plays, right? So that's kind of the issue for this one. I think you also like you can get starved a little bit. The fact that like Linlin can get removal of one of these 5-drops is really tough in those scenarios. But at the same time, if you're able to get your momentum started, this deck has probably one of the best starts in the game, especially if you go first and you find your 1-drop Lim in those scenarios. So no real new cards, right? We do have like the 2K Audio, which is a 2K from previous events as well. We do have like a single copy of Chopper, which again, this is really good for getting rid of like Hody Dawn. It's not really good as a blocker because like Hody, they get rid of Dawn, so for like Gum Gum Giant. Chopper is not a really good blocker in this deck because you do have to play it rested based on our leader effect, but if your opponent has to like respect and attack into it afterwards, it's fine. I really do like Blast Breath in this deck. I think like the Dawn -1 is like a really non-issue, and getting that plus 4K is really, really strong. And then we do have a copy of the Gamma Knife too. So by and large, I think this deck is still strong in its own way. It's something that I haven't really tested a lot in the OP11 meta, but I do think that we can have some really good interaction against specifically like Betty at times, like the fact that like Newgate can interact with things, and since we play a big board, that's hard to interact with sometimes. Like Sakazuki into get rid of their their bodies, their Karasu, and then attacking the rest. Like you can have like some really good like mid game, and that momentum can carry you out through the rest of it. So not much more to say, but congratulations to Kevin for their finish with Lim. Next up, we've got Justin with their build of Zoro, and this is like the first official event for OP11 where Zoro has been able to get a top, but I think generally, I think Zoro's gone on top in every meta that we've had since OP01 came out. So like every meta in the game, if you're keeping track. So, I think a lot of people were a little bit dissuaded for playing this deck in this meta specifically because of Buggy. That deck was like really expected to do very well. I think it started off slow and then it's been kind of gaining momentum over the next couple weeks. But the fact that that matchup is like if they play promo Buggy, you just lose. Like unironically, that matchup is so tough because not only is it difficult to remove that promo Buggy, but if they have Croc and Mihawk and you'd have to try to remove it twice, game over. Like there's nothing you can really do about it. It's very, very tough for you. But if you're able to dodge that matchup, the fact that like Rob Lucci is less present is really good for you. The fact that a lot of decks are like, compared to how like Betty's been able to be really successful, being able to just be aggressive and ask for a lot of cards. Like even though you're playing in 6K leaders a lot of the time, Zoro's really good at making like 3 or 4 6K attacks in a single turn. And asking for a card every time just really adds up as the game kind of continues. So we don't really have that many new techs, right? We do generally see the animal package as the preferred package to play Zoro. Kid Killer has been a favorite for the deck for a while, but it's been kind of falling out of favor. So seeing 2 copies of this is a little bit atypical, but not too crazy. And then the rest of the deck of like the like Rush with Luffy, we have Janbei, we have this Just Shut Up and Come With Us, and the Mole Pistol as well. So not much more to say. I do think again it is pretty impressive to be the first one to kind of top with this deck in general. And congratulations to Justin for their finish there. And then one bonus deck list. I know we've gone over like 15 deck lists already, but we do have time for one bonus one. This is the build here from Marc, who's able to get an X2 finish in France. So this was good enough to get into top 32 with better tiebreakers. And I know a lot of people really want Kobe to work. I know a lot of people are really invested in trying to do so. So I did want to kind of highlight a deck that was able to get a good amount of success. So generally speaking, we know that like 8-drop Kobe is like the bread and butter, like kind of what this deck tries to revolve around. We use like the 6-drop Helmeppo to get there. And generally speaking, like if Kobe has like a really good start, like it feels like a really good deck, right? The fact that we have removal with battle, the fact that this deck unironically has a really good matchup into Buggy because you get to remove their cards without actually removing their cards with effects, right? Like your effects let you battle into things, and that Buggy has like no defense against that. So if you have just like a local Buggy player that you really want to beat, play Kobe. I think Kobe's one of the best matchups for that deck in particular. But the fact that you do, again, have like removal against specifically Betty, I think is really strong for the deck. One tech ad that I don't see in a lot of builds is Hina, right? So Dawn times 1 opponent's turn. This character gains +4 cost and the activate main once per turn. You may place 1 card from your trash to the bottom of your deck. Give your up to 1 rested Dawn card to your leader or 1 of your characters. So that being able to get like that additional Dawn is good. I think we're pretty flexible with putting cards into our trash. So all of that seems really great. We do also have like the Hibari as well to be able to help us attack into characters. I will say like we are playing like less cards specifically that let you just attack active characters outside of just like the 8-drop Kobe itself and stuff, but I think that's fine. I think like you're kind of fine to do so. We're kind of more like a little bit defensive. We also have like 2 copies of like the doll, being able to like trash 1 card for your hand if you later as Navy, give 1 character like the -6K is really good in those scenarios, and lets you set up your trash in this the situations you need to. So honestly, this might be a deck that I test a little bit more recently. I think that Kobe, again, a lot of people really want this deck to work. I know a lot of people are on it, and I'd be curious to see what I could do with it as well. So again, this is Marc's version of the build. Congratulations for their finish with Kobe. But this has been a long video, and I do apologize for that, but there's just a lot to go over, and this has just been such a refreshing meta, a lot more refreshing than I thought it would be, and there's just so many decks that we can go over and leaders that are viable, and it's been a lot of fun. I think one of the best times to actively play the One Piece card game, even if Gum Gum Giant is a little bit overtuned at times. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you guys have any deck lists from the Toulouse regionals that I don't have, please let me know. I'd love to put them on the site, and I'm looking forward for the rest of this meta as well. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you all next time.